Hello, this is Elena, and you're about to listen to an episode of a new series we're calling The Effectiveness Workshop. After recording over 100 episodes of this show exploring marketing effectiveness, we realized we wanted more direct insights from CMOs who are applying these principles in their daily work. So we're introducing a new format where we chat with some incredibly smart marketers and jump right into practical takeaways to help you advance your career and your brand. I hope that you like it. Enjoy the show.
Marketing effectiveness.
What's your marketing philosophy?
What does marketing effectiveness mean to you?
Welcome to the Effectiveness Workshop.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
Hello, Elena.
Hello, Rob, and we are joined today by a special guest, Sarah Jordan, the Chief Marketing Officer at Constant Contact. Sarah has over 17 years of experience driving growth and brand strategy, and at Constant Contact, she oversees a team responsible for global demand, product marketing, communications, and branding. Her career includes leading the marketing efforts at EverCommerce, where she played a pivotal role in their IPO, and at PaySimple, where she helped scale the company from a startup to a significant player. She holds a Bachelor of Business Administration with concentrations in economics, marketing, and international business from Carroll College, and she has a passion for data and creativity, something we also love on this show. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Sarah, your alma mater, Carroll College, I was just doing a little snooping. They're one of the few schools in the country to offer anthrozoology. Did you take any anthrozoology, zoology when you're there? It's the study of human-animal relationships. I mean, it sounds a lot like marketing, or at least marketing to teenagers. Did you ever audit that class?
I did not. I didn't even know that was offered there. It was potentially something I would have considered because I didn't always know I was going to go into marketing. Maybe dodged a bullet on that one.
I don't know. I feel like you could maybe make quite a career out of that.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about some marketing here. We're back with our thoughts on some recent marketing, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. This interview with Sarah is part of our Effectiveness Workshop. It's a series where we talk to marketing leaders who are leading the way for effectiveness in the United States. And I usually kick off our interviews with a piece of research or an article. And for this interview, I chose one from Marketing Week. This is by Matthew Valentine, and it's titled, "You Can't Do Your Job Without It, Why Protecting Research Budgets Matter." We want to talk a little bit about the importance of understanding your audience today because Constant Contact has a unique one. And this article shares some concerning stats about the general state of market research. The author highlights that brand spending on market research has been steadily declining, with the latest IPA report showing a 2.9% drop. This is concerning because, as Mark Ritson famously puts it, allocating 5% of your budget to research ensures the other 95% is spent wisely. Research is essential, but many marketers shy away from it because they associate it with high costs. But even in a budget squeeze, there are creative, lower-cost ways to gather insights like ethnographic studies in stores or using social channels for quick quantitative data. Or even synthetic audiences, maybe. Either way, understanding your audience is essential, and the author believes not enough brands truly do. So, Sarah, thank you again for joining. This idea of understanding your audience, it must be something you value because, like I said earlier, Constant Contact has a distinctive audience. So I wanted to start by asking you if you could describe the kinds of small businesses you market to and maybe how that audience differs from your previous marketing roles.
It's a unique audience and one I've loved. It's actually the same audience I've been working in for the brunt of my career, and something I was really looking for when I came to Constant Contact. We market to and serve small businesses that can have a wide range of definition depending on what organization you're talking to, anywhere from under 1,000 employees or under 500 employees. We're really in the S of the SMB, so 0 to 15 employees is our sweet spot. We certainly range outside of that, but that's really our core, and that's usually who we're thinking about and who we're doing research on, and really varies across industries. So anywhere from a florist shop to a plumbing business to a barber to the cute retail shops you might see in your local community to the servicers coming to your home. We really serve a wide gamut of business types and industries underneath that small business umbrella.
Yeah, that must be really fun and also a challenge because I'm just thinking about the small businesses on my block and how different all the owners are and how they must have varying ranges of familiarity with software too. So I'd imagine that your audience could vary a lot according to the even type of business or who's running it?
They vary widely. This was certainly a challenge I was learning and growing into in some of my prior roles in marketing. It's something that I think has been a really great fit with Constant Contact because while those businesses vary in, call it their day-to-day trade, a lot of their pain points are fairly similar. Most small businesses of that size are strapped for time, probably started their business because they had a passion for the trade or the service or the good that they were providing, or just frankly running their own business, but didn't necessarily have a passion for the administrative work, or in some cases, the marketing work that goes into growing and managing a business. So in that realm, we find a lot of similarities in their pain points and how we can serve them. We just published a report recently that 73% of small businesses are not that confident in their marketing strategy. And so that was a real just wide-ranging pain point of we don't always feel confident about where we're investing and that we're seeing the right performance and that we're doing the right activities. And so really a core place for us to help to add value to that broad market. That's
Definitely something I noticed when I was doing some research into the brands you worked at before. I did think, oh, these are all companies that seem to market to small businesses. So it's no surprise you have experience there. You are relatively new to Constant Contact. You know the audience really well, but I believe you've been there a little over half a year. And I'm curious what the job is of the marketing team there. And has that changed at all from PaySimple EverCommerce where you worked before?
Yeah, I'm new to the company, not necessarily new to the brand. So because I've been working in this audience for a long time, I was really familiar with Constant Contact, certainly as kind of an up and coming marketing director back in the day. And I followed Constant Contact closely, was always watching, like, what are they doing? How are they building their brand? Where are they finding customers? So I'd followed the brand and the company a lot over the years. Was really excited when this opportunity came knocking. It felt like a perfect fit with my background and what I'd been learning over the years to come and bring to the table. And marketing at this company is really a growth driver. I know there's lots of articles and opinions out there about like, what's the new CMO role and what does a CMO mean, and certainly in the software market or in the SaaS market. And that role as the growth driver of the business is really important and key to Constant Contact, certainly in partnership, with my sales and product leads. But that person who's really studying the market. You mentioned a little bit about market research. I was thinking in my head as you were saying that we're almost the opposite. I feel like we've invested a ton in market research. The small business market is changing rapidly all the time, from where they're focused, what their pain points are, just age and demographic of business owners and how they think about marketing has changed wildly. So understanding that market has been a key part of the role, and probably in a measured term, just customer acquisition, customer expansion. That's probably the most important way that my role and my team is measured in terms of impact to the business. But that's a bit of a lagging indicator of success. So understanding our customer and helping to deliver the messaging, positioning, branding, growth channels, all the kind of recipe that goes into delivering new customers is core to the role.
I love to hear a B2B marketing team that's responsible for growth. You don't always hear that from B2B CMOs, but you mentioned that you were aware of Constant Contact before you started working there. I was too. When I told Rob we're interviewing the CMO of Constant Contact, he said, "Oh, Constant Contact. Like, you're right. You have very high."
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have a high brand awareness. You've been around for 30 years. So how have you seen marketing change throughout your career, and what has allowed Constant Contact to have such a strong staying power, to be so well known and last for this long?
The space that I've been focused in, B2B software and SaaS, has undergone a ton of evolution. When I was just starting out as a marketing leader, there was always this dynamic of like, is this a sales-led growth organization or a marketing-led growth organization or a product-led growth organization? And there was sort of this dynamic of a sales generated lead and this approach of outbound versus a marketing generated lead. And thankfully, a lot of that has been sort of wiped away. And the idea is that these three functions are really the most important ingredients to a successful growth strategy and should work in partnership as opposed to kind of in competition with each other. So that was a big evolution of this idea that those teams work really hand in hand to generate growth and in partnership. But also, obviously, this transition of what was once deemed traditional marketing into digital marketing. And now the constant challenge we're faced with is how much mix do you need of each to spur growth? So it's been a really fun dynamic. I feel like I sit squarely in the middle of sort of legacy marketing that was all about building brand and seeing what was come out the bottom. And frankly, a lot of marketers, to your point, weren't always gauged on growth and revenue and kind of measurable outcomes. Versus now, it's almost the other side of the spectrum. You're directly expected to account for almost every dollar that you spend in some measurable outcomes. So it's been fun growing up in this evolution and really learning and hopefully balancing both sides of it.
So you talked a little bit there about your team's responsibility, like driving growth, and measurement cannot be easy, especially when you have a sales force too, and you're a big company. So how does your team prove the impact that marketing is having on Constant Contact?
Hopefully without going into a vomit of all of the data points that we're tracking all the time. It's probably one of my favorite things about marketing is that it's art and science, and there's no shortage of metrics and things you could be looking at to see the impact of what you're doing. But we really try to balance those, call it one-to-one and one-to-many ways of seeing impact in everything that you're doing. And I generally believe that you can measure impact of almost anything that you're doing in one way or another. Sort of that blowing up the balloon effect and seeing how ways that you're broadcasting your message out might be generating traffic to the site and generating new leads and trials into your product, all the way down to new customer acquisition that I mentioned before. That's probably the most important way that we are measured on impact. But it is a lagging indicator. Seeing how many customers are coming in the door is sort of like, great, all of the things we were doing, like now our work is done to generate those customers for the most part. The ways that we're measuring those leading indicators in building awareness, our market share, how much are we in the consideration funnel, we really try to balance, I would call it brand and exposure and building interest metrics down to the demand capture metrics, more of the like lead conversion rate, did we close that lead, and really viewing all of them in a mix. And we joke about sort of the under the covers metrics that our marketing team is looking at on a daily basis and constantly tweaking and fine tuning and making lots of decisions versus the broadcast metrics that we share with our ELT and with the business to say, here are the headline metrics of the health of the business and how we're growing.
I've never heard blowing up the balloon or under the covers. I'm liking these. I can tell you're a marketer.
It was like a good analogy. You brought up, Sarah, balance quite a bit throughout this conversation. So I want to double click on that for a second as it relates to media mix. You're always looking at both traditional channels, so you guys have done quite a bit of radio in your past, along with digital and television. How do you balance all of those investments between kind of the traditional, the offline, and the digital?
That job is never done, and finding that right mix. I generally like to make sure we are weighing between, call it one-to-one channels, which are generally more of those demand capture channels, really important. And those are usually the ones that you can measure down to a fine tooth, every dollar, every click, and this is where they landed. And those are more easily scalable ones. With the one-to-many, what are the broadcast messages generating more of that interest and awareness, and how you measure the impact of that over time. So the balance between those two, and whether you want to do it as a percentage or a dollar amount, it's something that we probably sway back and forth, but it's generally important that you're able to see the impact of each one of those. And even in between, call it the broadcast messages, there's ways that you can see whether that broadcast message is actually having an impact with the desired audience or not. And that was something that, being 6 months in, that I was kind of tasked with looking at when I first joined, of where our media mix was going and whether we were really seeing the impact that we wanted from those messages. Were we hitting the audiences that we wanted with those messages, and starting to move some of that around and see some of the impact of that, certainly over the last several months.
Obviously, we are a TV agency, but this podcast is a very safe place. I don't believe that you guys utilize TV as much anymore, if at all. Do you know what has driven that decision?
I would say, and obviously catching up with where Constant Contact has invested historically and some of what we were weighing when I started, we have definitely done some experimentation with linear TV and call it more traditional cable channel commercials. And one of the things that we were finding, and this was resonating true with some of our market research, is that that might be hitting audiences that aren't necessarily in market for the type of offering that we have. It might be hitting our existing customers, but a lot of our newer customers tend to be of a younger demographic and are newer businesses and may not be in those same kind of cable TV networks. But where we were having success reaching them is in some of the OTT, some of the streaming networks, definitely in YouTube. So it's not to say that video and sort of like television as a broad scope wasn't a good investment. It was just the particular way and how we were hitting them that we wanted to optimize. And we've seen some strong shifts there. But again, something that we're always weighing, and especially as we're continuing to expand in international markets, some of those learnings that we've had in the US may be totally different in new regions. And we're kind of approaching each of those markets with an open lens of new learnings and new experimentation.
Well, consumers, they see all of that as TV, and so do we. So I'd consider you a fan of TV, so that's fine. That's great. Sarah, talking about kind of like TV and this balance like between offline and digital being a bit of a moving target, I think that resonates with us and what we've heard from our clients too. There's always that advice like, oh, it should be 60-40, but that isn't always like the exact right thing for each brand. And that 60-40 principle, it comes from this field of marketing effectiveness, which is something that we like to talk about on this show. And I know it can mean a lot of different things to different marketers. So I always like to ask, what does marketing effectiveness mean to you? And another big topic around marketing effectiveness, is there a gap in the United States? Are we behind?
To the question on marketing effectiveness, I genuinely believe, and I know I said this earlier, that almost everything that you're doing from a marketing lens can be measured, and just in different ways. And if you've got the right research out there and you're looking at the right ways of measuring impact, that you can see an impact from anything that you're doing. And so for me, effectiveness is being able to see that impact in some way throughout the funnel. In the US, and this was certainly something that we found to be true in my prior role and something we find to be true here, is it's not so much a gap in the US, it's just that the US is the most rapid consumer of content and media and making decisions really quickly. So a lot of times the speed that we see people going through content and making a decision about a product, and even sometimes making a cancellation decision about a product, is just really, really rapid, versus in some other regions, it tends to be a little bit slower. They might be consuming the same types of media, but just usually over a longer period of time. Their decision to potentially buy is going to take a little bit longer. And also we've seen that those customers tend to also be a little bit stickier, like their decision to leave might be a little bit longer because they spent more time up front. The US, especially in kind of a SaaS SMB world, it's not uncommon for a customer to start 5 different trials and then ultimately decide which one they want to keep. Just knowing that and having those expectations in the different approaches and ways that people make decisions in different regions, it just sets up an expectations of what you would expect to see on the impact and effectiveness of your marketing.
That's a really great point. I haven't ever heard someone bring up that, but it makes a lot of sense that even a lot of people compare us to the UK, but the UK, it's such a different country than the United States. People consume media differently. Like you're saying, they have different buying habits. And yeah, I've never heard someone make that case for it. That makes a lot of sense to me. One thing I wanted to ask you about is something you've already mentioned a few times, which is research, because one part of marketing effectiveness that we're especially excited about is just the use of research. I know that you're using it in your role, but what's your experience with like general marketing research and then the research you conduct at Constant Contact? And does that drive decisions for you there, or how does it support your marketing strategy?
I would say we use a really great blend of, call it rapid fire research, where we have ongoing studies happening, basically like a quarterly roadmap of these are the studies that we're going to be looking into, whether it's an element of one of our ideal customer profiles, evolution of a persona, a particular feature we want to deep dive on to see what and how we should build it into our product, all the way through to those larger investments that we might do with our in-house team. We have an excellent in-house market research team. They're fantastic. Or something that we might provision externally because it's something we want to balance and publish and make sure that we have that objective lens on the data. But we usually like to balance anything that we're doing, whether it's a bot study, something we're provisioning, or something that we're doing internally, and balance it against each other, that we're not too much in our own echo chamber, that what we're seeing from our own data is stacking true to the studies that we're seeing externally. But I'm a huge fan of research, and especially, as I mentioned, with the sort of rapidly changing dynamic of the small business market and some of the, call it, decades of trends that have been happening and impacting the small business market as it is today, that research is just core to any decisions that we make, from marketing, product, and even selling. Learning that customers today want and might expect a very different selling experience than potentially a customer of 10 years ago, or just of a different age demographic, that they might expect to have a different conversation with a sales rep, and learning into that.
Sarah, let's ruffle some feathers for a minute. All right. What would you say is your most contrarian marketing opinion?
I think it's time for a contrarian corner. The lines are drawn, who's right, who's wrong.
So I might have mentioned it already. It's something that I usually, with any new team, new peer, that I try to rip out right away is this concept of marketing generated versus sales generated. It's really common in software, especially B2B software, and I can't stand it. And I usually try to find a way out of it as quickly as possible. With most organizations, and this is true for Constant Contact, I can't imagine a scenario where a customer is going to come in the door and not have interacted in some way with marketing. And that's usually true for sales as well. So this idea that one of you is like winning that deal, it just makes no sense. This is a three-legged race. Like, we're in this together. We shouldn't be competing for who generated or impacted what. So I think it's a lot of wasted time spent on claiming something when we should just be in it to win together and more focused on measuring the impact of our roles and, how we optimize the funnel together. And that's also true with this very popular concept of product-led growth. They're all three leading. We're all three together. Again, there's very few customers that are going to get all the way to becoming a customer and retained customer who hasn't interacted with all three of those functions, and that they've each played a valuable role in bringing that customer over the line.
I'm obsessed with that opinion, Sarah. I love that. And I totally agree with you. And it creates just tension where you could be focused on higher level things. And I think that having the same goals too, I'm guessing the work outputs are better. And I love that. That's a great contrarian opinion.
See, I think breeding internal disdain within your organization is one of the joys of, but no.
There's going to be healthy friction between marketing and sales. Like, it's just going to always be there. If we can remove some elements of it, it's just only
Absolutely.
helpful.
Well, then what is the best decision you've made in marketing, and what do you wish you could go back in time and erase from your decisions that you've made?
There were so many to choose from in both regards. I would say the best, and now is something that I really try to frame as a philosophy in decision making, is always trying to orient a decision in the lens of what's best for the customer. It's really easy, especially at an executive level, because you're presenting to the board and you're staring at financial outcomes and you're always focused on trying to hit goals and achieve the business performance that you need to hit, that it's sometimes easy to forget at those executive levels what this is all for and that where the core success comes from. So one of my favorite things about being in the small business market is when they succeed, we succeed, and vice versa. If we build something of value for our customers and deliver it in a way that's valuable and discoverable and easy, and service them in a way that is valuable and easy and simple, then they will stick with us. They will stay with us. They will grow with us. And so always framing decisions in how does this add value to the customer? And if there's a decision between two or three things, which of these do we think is going to add more value to the customer and help them be more successful, which helps us be more successful? That has been learned through many, many iterations of decisions, where if you feel like you can't really clearly connect that in a way that, there's usually kind of an easier path to seeing how to make that decision in a more positive way and something that is more impactful to the customer. And I would say the flip of that is making decisions that might have seemed positive on the surface, but there wasn't a way to connect that. And sometimes takes you off down a path that you're like, why are we doing this? Like, this feels like a giant distraction to what we really wanted to do. It's just served as a great philosophy, certainly not something that I can check every box and say every decision roots back to, but especially for marketers to kind of be that customer champion at the executive table, it's proved to be really helpful.
That's great advice and great for marketers to return to, because I think when we stray too far from that, we become like the make it pretty department and we start just doing things that aren't like really speaking to the customer, driving value. And if you are the voice of a customer, you become so useful within the organization too. I think maybe that's how you could expand beyond even communications into other parts of the business.
It evolves you well past the make it pretty to what's a message and a voice and a presentation that a customer is going to actually resonate with or connect with, through to it's, especially in small business and SaaS, it's not uncommon for marketers to just be lead monkeys, just get us more leads. And we can game that system all day long. If we're just measured on lead production, like I'll find you a bunch of leads, but it's really that focus on what are the new customers and leads and prospects that I think are actually going to find value in this product. It just sort of breeds that success cycle where you're accountable to the right things that actually matter. And you're all focused on how do we acquire more customers that are going to find value in this product and then giving value to those customers.
I'm not your lead monkey. I love that. That is a phrase. It's like, I think that happens a lot, especially in B2B, where we become obsessed with the number of leads and the lead metric. Like, are they even good leads? And yeah, I'm not your lead monkey.
See Elena's new t-shirt she's going to be getting. I'm not your lead monkey.
I mean, that might come out at a future meeting here. Oh, I love that. Well, Sarah, thank you again for joining. Rob and I, when we were preparing for this interview, I was like, she's smart. I can tell she's smart, and I'm scared we don't have Angela here because she's going to be talking to the two of us, but you're definitely very smart, and I love your perspective, and I think you have some points of view that are unique for like a B2B CMO, and I can see why Constant Contact, they brought you on the team. So I wanted to end with more of a lighthearted question, and since we started this conversation talking about the importance of your audience, I wanted to ask you, Sarah, if you could be an audience member at any event, it could be historical, a concert, anything you want, which would you choose and why?
There are so many to choose from. And I do love live music. I'm in Denver and we have Red Rocks. And so there's probably a million answers I could have provided to this. So growing up in, call it small business software, and I was a fairly young marketing director, VP, and in some cases like in a boardroom, like very clearly the youngest person in the room and also probably the only woman in the room. And it was a real passion of mine to coach and lead and help women especially find their voice and confidence and style that as leaders. And so to your question, I would love to be in attendance when our first woman president is elected, whether that happens soon or later. That's definitely something that would be just super exciting to be in person at, whether that is a possibility or not. Yeah.
That's a great one.
That is a really good one. Tim Cook is a big listener of our podcast. So I'm just going to say, Tim, I apologize in advance, but you, sir, are no Steve Jobs when it comes to presenting. And so if I could be an audience member when Steve Jobs unveiled the greatest product ever, the iPhone, like that was one of the best product unveilings ever. I did watch it live because I'm that big of a nerd via the computer. But if I could have actually been there, oh my goodness, that would have just been amazing to actually be there in person. So that'd be my pick.
Well, we're about to have very different answers. I'm choosing a sports one. So I used to ride horses. I'm a horse girl, and unfortunately, you never lose that. So I would love to be in the audience when Secretariat wins the Triple Crown. That must have just been such an amazing moment. And he won the race by so much. And yeah, so if I go back in time, I'd like to see that happen. Perfect. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Sarah, thank you again for being an awesome guest.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Taylor De Los Reyes for producing the show. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you like the podcast, please leave us a review. Now go forth and build great marketing.
Marketing Architects.